All right, so very good afternoon to all of you, our cherished viewers of Hot Issues, and welcome to another exciting edition of your favorite current affairs program. So, over the last, few weeks, probably 2 weeks, we've been talking about contaminated fuel at the bulk oil storage and transportation company. Many of you have asked that question. So, how come we have contaminated fuel, and how come a minister is talking about making sure that even in the sale of contaminated fuel, it's open up to competitive tendering? This afternoon, I have one man who knows a lot. In fact, he set up the bulk oil storage and transportation company, BOST, which is in the news this particular week. My name is Winston, and when we return after this short break, I'll be introducing my guest, and then we begin deliberations on this BOST saga. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back from that short break, and thanks for staying with us on Hot Issues. My guest this afternoon on Hot Issues is a former CEO of the Volta River Authority. He is the Chief Policy Analyst of the Ghana Institute of Public Policy Options, Dr. Charles Wereko Brobbey, which many of you call Tarzan. Good afternoon, Doc, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Just to make a small correction.
Yeah.
VRE does not come into this. I was Energy Policy Advisor to the government of Ghana when we set up BOST. So I think that's a more appropriate description.
Except that many Ghanaians remember you also for your role at VRA.
Many Ghanaians are very young. This is work I did from 1988.
So tell me, what do you make of this whole BOST saga, particularly because you was the person who set this company up?
Well, BOST, as was conceived, had to deal with three problems. First of all, up until that time, and since the 1966 coup, petroleum products had literally been conveyed from the thermal oil refinery right up to all parts of Ghana. That was the first thing that needed to be addressed. You needed intermediate stops along the way where you could regionalize the transportation of petroleum products. Second thing was that in 1990, there was a Gulf War, and within the space of 3 weeks, petroleum prices shot up from $18 to $40 a barrel. And my minister at the time, so they called them secretaries, Atuahai, had this wonderful idea that no, just to be able to manage, because at that time we were fully dependent on importation of petroleum, and it took up the bulk of our foreign exchange, and had created problems during the 1974 oil crisis, etc., that we should get into a stage where we will store, as a strategic store, about 12 weeks requirement for petroleum products, so that at any material moment if there's a crisis in the world, we could manage in the very short term. And then the third, which was the operational function of BOST, was to distribute petroleum products, which would either be produced by the refinery or imported by the refinery for the day-to-day use. So there were three functions. And because GOIL was such a huge company at the time, and center of operations, and had a lot of stations outside of Accra, under a World Bank project, GOIL was building a number of tanks, really for its operational needs. But once the other problems came along, it was decided that, we should go seek more money for the strategic purposes and also to make sure the operational needs of other regions were met. So we went to the Koreans, the South Koreans, and they gave us some money to build these tanks at what they call APD, Accra Place Depot, and then up in Mami Water, and then Kumasi, and then Buipe, and I think now it's been expanded. And then we built a pipeline which goes all the way, and it used to go under the original Adomi Bridge, and then it would deposit products to be carted to the north on the Volta Lake. So it was a very comprehensive thing. And you won't believe it, since it was set up, you and I and everybody who's ever bought fuel is always contributing. There's actually a strategic stock levy which you pay anytime you buy fuel. So the people of Ghana have make sure that they contribute to meet our needs. I don't think the original 12-week storage is being met. Possibly half of it is being met. But it was very clear what BOST was set up to do.
So before we get into this whole contaminated fuel, what's your assessment of the performance of BOST over the years since its establishment up until now?
Well, as far as I know, what problems there are have occurred in the last 3 or 4 years. There's been a very serious problem with the pipeline that was built. I think that was sabotaged by so many people trying to steal fuel from it that I think for many years it hasn't been operating now. I don't know if it has been repaired. And so that the very idea of things that were supposed to be avoided, of having bulk road vehicles transporting fuel, I believe is back because the pipeline, at least from APD to Akosombo, has been interfered with. But I believe the pipeline from the port to the APD. One other problem which I didn't talk about at the time was that the refinery had very, very powerful unions at the time which were always going on strike. So it was decided at the beginning that we should ensure that APD would be built and that if you brought in products from abroad, you could actually bypass. Instead of the products going first to the refinery and then going to the other depots, they could actually bring in products from the outside refined products
okay.
and push it straight to the Accra Plains depot and then from there onward transfer to other places.
So what do you make of this saga? I mean, contaminated fuel.
I'm very surprised. I think my take on this is that there should be really no contamination. There are technical processes which take place. I'm sure you've heard the term slop being discussed.
Help us understand the technical processes.
Exactly.
Yes.
There are 3 technical processes which take place. There's something called slop. What happens is that when you bring products in, you don't have the luxury of having dedicated pipelines for different products. So essentially, you flow the products through the same pipeline. So when you flow, normally on the basis of the lightest first, followed by the next lightest, and finally the heaviest. When you floated the first product, then what you do is essentially like clean up the pipeline to ensure that you can flow the second product that is with it being mixed up with the product you just flowed. So there is a very small volume where in trying to clean up the pipeline, you get a mixture of the old products and the new. And that is what is called slop. Okay. Then there's a second thing that is called sludge. Because we have a strategic storage component of this whole operation.
But before you go to the sludge, the slop, is it in large volumes?
It shouldn't be in large volumes. I believe each time you do a transfer, you probably will do about 2,500 to 3,000 liters. It's not a very big volume, okay. So it's not that big. Sludge is usually when you've settled a product for a long time, for example, for a strategic stock, and the sediments tend to settle on the bottom of the tank, and occasionally to make sure that you have the kind of quality you want, you might want to put that product on the market, clean out the tank, and then fill up again. And so the sediments that settle on the bottom, when you wash the tank out, that's what they call sludge.
Okay.
And contamination is when, it's a deliberate process where, for example, you are trying to put diesel into a tank that is dedicated to hold, let's say, regular petrol, and then you mix, accidentally you mix.
Why do you say it's a deliberate process?
Because if you are running things properly, it shouldn't happen.
That's intentional, you say?
I will be generous and say occasionally, and it's very hard to see, but at the most generous, it shouldn't be such an occurrence, and certainly not of the type of volume that we are talking about. You know, somebody would have suddenly discovered, even if there's an accident, oh, a small volume of products of the off-spec product has been put in the wrong tank. But I think to actually talk about 5 million liters of contaminated fuel is a real mistake. And the managers of BOST, because BOST has been put into private managers since about 2014 or 15, I think they should be held responsible because it's their job to ensure that such operations go on, even if the staff there are BOST staff, because they are paid from what I hear, about $300,000 to $600,000 a month plus expenses, and so really they have absolutely no business to let something like this happen.
And you say they should be held responsible.
What happens to them? Liable in the sense that, you know, if we are talking 5 million gallons of contaminated fuel, I don't know what the retail prices of these things should be. That's a loss to the nation Ghana. That's something that you and I's levies that we pay every day at the pumping station has gone. I don't know what the price of fuel is at the moment, but assuming it's, let's say, 15 cedis a gallon or 4 cedis a liter or something like that. If you sell it for 1 liter, is
30 pesos.
Yeah, 10, yes.
But in this case, I mean, the MD of BOST says, well, it happened before I took office. When I took office, I investigated it.
No, I think we should distinguish their stages. First of all, isn't it curious that in the 4 or 5 days between one MD leaving and another taking over, suddenly 5 million liters of contaminated
What is curious about
fuel?
that?
Well, curious about it in the sense that somebody, in my view, was taking advantage to misbehave.
Who, in your view, was
I don't know, because I don't even know who works at all. That's what I'm saying, that the managers of the facility, who I believe are called TSL, will have to be asked to explain, you know, really how this came about. I wouldn't blame the old MD or the new MD because they were not there, because apparently it occurred, you know. But I mean, of course.
But there's something that has been happening, we are told. 25 million liters over the last 2 years.
No, I'm not sure. You see,
that's what the minister says.
Well, this is what I am not sure whether we are confusing waste oils, which is slop and sludge.
But I mean, but based on what you told us about slop, for instance, 3,000 liters, and if you have 5 million, 25 million.
I don't really want to get into that.
No, I'm not getting that with you.
No. Let's be very clear.
Yes.
There needs to be a very thorough investigation of both the two last regimes that have headed BOST, to go right from the beginning. So unfortunately, we are in this country where serious problems occur, and we try to kind of do away with it because we enter into a political partisan discussion. The duty of a political party once you become government is to work in the interest of the nation Ghana. So this whole idea that we get into partisan political discussions, you did this, you did not do this, you did that, it works against the interest of Ghana. What we need to do in all of this stuff is that we should investigate right from the start of all of these processes what has been happening.
But that's what the two parties are calling for.
Which two parties?
NPP,
no, I'm not interested
I know,
in the two parties.
But that's what they're calling for. They're all calling for investigations.
No. Look, this whole thing is a sham. Before people call for investigation, there had been political discussions on radio. In fact, there was no, and anybody sitting in Ghana, you know, depending on whether they were MPP or NDC, had already taken positions. You know, let us make sure that our politicians and governments and others work in the interest of Ghana, not their particular parties. And the point I'm making is that really there has been an unfortunate development. Isn't it interesting that BOST has been running since 1993, and it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that this problem has occurred? Clearly, something has gone wrong with bus operations in the last 3 or 4 years. And we need to investigate it. And the more we departisan it, the better for this country. Because the loss is not for MPP, the loss is not for NDC, the loss is for the country Ghana. And sometimes I wish that, you know, some of you people in the media will not instinctively run to the government and ranking members on matters which really are losses to the nation.
That's what we are
and we need
to
look at them in that context.
That's what we are talking
you know, and that is why, for me, anybody who says that they're going to streamline how to sell contaminated products, I think is wrong.
We'll get back to that. I mean, how to streamline contaminated fuel. This is Hot Issues on TV3. I am Winston, and my guest this afternoon is Dr. Charles Wereko Brobbey. You probably would call him Tarzan. But we'll go for a final break. When we return, we'll find out his thoughts on the recommendation of streamlining the sale of contaminated fuel. All right, so welcome back from that short break, and thanks for staying with us. This is Hot Issues on TV3, and I still have Dr. Charles Wereko Brobbey. So, what's your concern with, you know, the streamlining the sale of contaminated fuel?
Like I keep saying, if there's a market for slop and sludge, then because those are part of operational issues. You can't run, you know, a tank farm without dealing with sludge and slop. If there's a market for it, and I'm not sure that there's actually a market, because we've run this facility for 25, 27 years and there has been no market. If somebody smart has found a market, then you can set into place, you know, very transparent systems for getting rid of this if somebody needs a market. I don't want to hear anybody talking about contamination. The minute you start saying you streamline a sale of contamination, for me, you are licensing the illegitimate. Something that must not happen, you are not going to streamline.
That's something that happens.
No, it has happened maybe, no, you see, I'm not saying that. If you get contaminated products, it is a fault of somebody, and if you take action and make sure that the person is held fully liable, or the company is fully liable, they'll make sure it doesn't happen again. And so what I'm saying is, if you say that you're going to streamline the selling of contaminated products, what you have done is legitimize the production of contaminated products. And I don't think we should go down that very slippery slope. We should really ensure that you've been given a responsibility for a job, you made a mistake, let's investigate the mistake. In the uncertain situation of it being an accident, maybe you might look at it. But we shouldn't start. You see, there's a whole lot of problems with illegal operations in the downstream Ghanaian petroleum market. You know, companies have been set up which are, because there's price liberalization, go out and say they are selling their products cheaper than others, and there's a whole lot of problems.
Okay.
We shouldn't add to the problems by making this idea of contaminated products a regular part of the operation of the bulk oil storage and transportation company.
That means that, you know, the recommendations by the minister, for instance, to A, review and introduce new regulations on the sale of and discharge of contaminated products, and B, to codify and publish widely a competitive tendering process based on transparent advertisement for the sale of contaminated products is not necessary.
Replace the word contaminated by slop and sludge.
And that becomes important or necessary.
Pardon?
If you
No, because, like I said, if there is a market, you see, the slop and the sludge is all part of normal operations. So they'll be produced.
Yeah.
If somebody has found a market for them, and you can be sure that the market is not, you know, dilution into normal petroleum products so that people's engines start get knocking. You know, The streamlining has to be, we know where this product is going. We know what it's going to be used for. We don't want to see a situation where it is somehow, as I've read somewhere, that in some of the experiments that they did, the composition between what was found at Boston and what was found at one of the oil companies were not the same. There had been obviously some dilution and
NPO also says everything is intact.
Pardon?
NPO says everything
Well,
is
I've
intact.
read other things.
Yeah, well, NPA says that everything is intact.
Well, I've read other things.
You don't trust the NPA?
No, please. Let's not get into this business we don't trust.
No, but that's
NPA.
what they have said. That's,
You know something?
tell me.
The NPA was set up under former President Kufuor, and his work was very necessary. So you don't say you don't trust the NPA. I think that, you know, I had discussions yesterday in which the Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors were also saying that they have impeccable information as some of the products have actually cannot be fully accounted for. That is why we need a thorough investigation. You know, a thorough investigation that looks at, you know, how long has this activity
A
been
thorough
going on?
investigation conducted by which institution?
It doesn't have to be the institution. The minister set up a committee.
He set up one and he says the committee's work is done.
Well, he didn't say the committee's work is done. He says the committee's work is not necessary. Please, don't put words into his mouth.
He says the committee has exonerated.
No,
hold on.
He said the committee was never even had a sitting. So the committee has been abrogated and a new committee headed by the head of the chemical engineer at Tech has been put in. I think...
Yes, but if you should look at his press statements that he did, he says, press statement presented by the Honorable Boakye Jaako, Minister for Energy, on the status of investigations on the sale of contaminated products by the Bulk Oil Storage and Transportation Company Limited. This was the status of investigations on it. So he came in there and presented investigations.
No, please, no, you should read what he found.
He said, what he found, I'll just read that to you. It says, further to our intention to set up a ministerial committee on this matter, the ongoing investigations by the National Security, the BNI, and the National Petroleum Authority have so far established. Let me just get, you know, the continuation of the document for you so you get to understand that.
Please go back to the preamble. Our intention to establish a committee. So that intention was never fulfilled.
But he tells you the status of the investigation. Now, the status of the investigation now is that the National Security, the BNI...
The National Security was not the committee. No, please.
In the committee, hold on.
It was not the committee. It was not the committee.
It was a member of it was part of the committee.
It was part of the committee, but it wasn't the committee.
It wasn't the committee. I'm not saying that.
No, we can argue about... we can discuss whether BNI's work was relevant to this exercise. And I'm prepared to concede to you that it was totally irrelevant. So let's move on. But don't get down the line of saying that the committee sat. The committee did not sit. BNI was to be a member of that committee. Yes. We need a very thorough investigation, you know, not a whitewash, not supposed to cover up any particular person, but for the interest of Ghana, we must get to the bottom of it. Why is it that the last 4 years of BOST operations have been corrupted by all these kind of things which BOST has been in, from 1993 to let's say 2003 or 2013, that would be 20 years. 20 years, yes. 20 years of unblemished operation. And suddenly, you know, we have a mess. I think we should get to the bottom of this mess and ensure that culprits that are found must be dealt with. Absolutely dealt with. And, you know, all the big English about rationalization and sale and, you know, President Akufo-Addo, one of his biggest commitments was open tendering processes to ensure that there is transparency and everything else. So I don't think it's anything new for somebody to say, I will ensure open transparency from now on. The important thing to do is that you do not legitimize the illegitimate by getting to a situation where people deliberately go and contaminate fuel so that they can create a market for it, so that the country loses 75% of the revenue that we would have got when the thing didn't happen. And let me say it again. You know, we're doing our own thing. I don't know why we went and gave our management of BOST to an external company. That external company's duty is to ensure that the operations are done properly. And this is my view, but they should not be allowed to go scot-free and punished for supervising such a thing.
So the thorough investigation that you talk about, what should the minister do? What sort of measures should he put in place to have the thorough investigations conducted?
Well, he set up a committee under the professor from Tech, which I believe has got essentially the same kind of membership from knowledgeable institutions in the industry. The important thing to do is that I would want the professor, as the knowledgeable person, to revise the terms of reference. You know, we are not interested in streamlining sales of contaminated or slop or sludge. We are interested in ensuring that things that did not used to happen before, but happened in the last 3 or 4 years, must be stopped. Whoever is responsible must be dealt with. And, you know, one of the things I found very curious was when the minister first set up the meeting, the committee, the staff union of BOST protested about some of the membership of the committee. Why in the hell should the staff union of BOST be interested in ensuring that the sanity prevails in an industry which gives them jobs?
That's where they work.
No, and it turned out that according to some reports that they had also been buying products. Why should the staff union be engaged in trading with its own company? You know, if you work there, you ensure that everything is done properly so that your job is maintained. Not get involved in activities which sabotage the very purpose for which we are putting out this particular facility.
Dr. Charles Wereko Brobbey, who's Chief Policy Analyst of the Ghana Institute of Public Policy Options. Your assessment of the NPP's first 6 months?
I think we came here to talk about contamination.
But now that I have you, and I'm taking you on, you being Chief Policy Analyst of GIPO, your assessment so far. Just a sentence.
Just a sentence?
Yes. Or maybe a paragraph. Yes, your assessment.
The government ran for 4 years. Therefore, I think 6 months is too early to say, you know, what should they have done and not done. My only comment and my worry is that there are too many institutions in this country which have not got governing boards. And I believe that, you know, to make our institutions work, there must be governing boards. We now have literally a relationship between the chief executive and the minister. So we are now, we have a system where our institutions are being run by ministerial fiat, not by governing bodies. That's the only thing that I worry about.
Dr. Charles Wereko Brobbey, thank you very much for joining us. All right, so that's all from us this afternoon, Hot Issues. Thank you so much for joining us. Winston Amwa. Do have a lovely weekend, and make sure you catch me up on Sunrise on 3FM 92.7 on Monday from 5:55 a.m. to 10 a.m. Have a lovely weekend.